For 12 years, a monster stalked the forests and train stations of Soviet Russia. Children and young women vanished without a trace. When he was finally caught, the body count was unthinkable. 53 confirmed victims. This is the story of Andrei Chikatilo, the Butcher of Rostov, one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born in 1936 in the Ukrainian village of Yabloknoy, during one of history's darkest periods. Stalin's forced famine had devastated Ukraine. Chikatilo grew up hearing stories that his older brother had been kidnapped and cannibalized by starving neighbors, a story never verified, but one that haunted him. He was a bedwetter well into his teens, mercilessly bullied and humiliated. In school, he was mocked for his poor eyesight and awkward manner. These early years planted seeds of rage and inadequacy that would grow into something monstrous. Chikatilo became a teacher, working with children and young people throughout the 1970s. He married and had 2 children, appearing to live a normal Soviet life. But colleagues noticed strange behavior. He would stare at students inappropriately. There were accusations of molestation. He was forced to resign from multiple positions. His marriage was troubled, he suffered from chronic impotence and feelings of inadequacy. The rage was building. In 1978, it finally exploded. December 22, 1978. 9-year-old Lena Zakotnova was walking home from school in the town of Shakhty. Chikatilo lured her to an old shed he'd purchased. What happened inside that shed set the pattern for 12 years of horror. He attempted to sexually assault her, but his impotence triggered violent rage. He stabbed her repeatedly, achieving arousal only through her suffering and death. Her body was found in a nearby river. Police arrested another man, a prior sex offender, who was executed for the crime. Chikatilo had gotten away with murder. For 3 years, nothing. Then in September 1981, Chikatilo killed again. And again. And again. He developed a method: prowl train stations and bus stops, targeting runaways, prostitutes, and children traveling alone. He'd offer them food, alcohol, or money. Once isolated in nearby forests or abandoned buildings, he would attack. The murders were savage beyond description: mutilation, disembowelment, and in many cases, acts of cannibalism. He removed eyes, believing victims could retain images of their killer even after death. The Soviet system worked against the investigation. Serial murder was considered a Western problem, it wasn't supposed to exist in the communist paradise. Police were slow to connect cases across different jurisdictions. There was no centralized database. No criminal profiling. Victims were often dismissed as runaways or delinquents. Meanwhile, bodies continued to appear in forests around Rostov-on-Don. Local residents whispered about a maniac. The police knew something was terribly wrong, but the scale was unimaginable. By 1983, the pattern was undeniable. A special task force was formed under Detective Isa Kostoyev. They analyzed every murder, looking for connections. The killer targeted vulnerable people near transportation hubs. He used a knife. The injuries showed a frenzy, but also a ritual: certain organs were always removed. They were hunting someone with knowledge of anatomy, someone who could blend in, someone methodical. They created psychological profiles and started surveillance of train and bus stations in the Rostov region. Chikatilo was questioned multiple times. In 1984, he was actually detained at a bus station after suspicious behavior. Police searched his briefcase, finding a knife and rope. But his blood type didn't match samples from the crime scenes, or so they thought. Due to a rare condition, Chikatilo's blood type and his semen type were different. This inconsistency saved him. He was released after 3 months. The killing continued. By 1990, the death toll exceeded 50 people. The task force changed tactics. They flooded train stations with undercover officers. Every person who frequented these areas was logged and tracked. Chikatilo's name appeared repeatedly in their surveillance reports. On November 6, 1990, he was seen emerging from a forest path near Lesostep station. There was blood on his face and hand. An officer noted his details but didn't detain him. He had no immediate cause. Days later, another body was discovered in that same forest. It was victim number 53. November 20, 1990. Police arrested Andrei Chikatilo. At first, he denied everything. But investigators had learned from past mistakes. They withheld details only the killer would know. They used psychological pressure. After 9 days of interrogation, Chikatilo began to talk. What he confessed was beyond comprehension. He described murders in chilling detail. He led police to bodies that hadn't been found. By the end, he confessed to 56 murders, though only 53 could be proven. Chikatilo spoke for hours. He described how killing gave him satisfaction he couldn't achieve otherwise. He talked about the taste of human flesh. He expressed no genuine remorse, only self-pity and complaints about his childhood. Psychiatrists evaluated him. Was he insane? Legally, no. He knew his actions were wrong. He hid the bodies, he cleaned crime scenes, he evaded police. He was a sexual sadist and a psychopath, but he was competent to stand trial. Soviet Russia would have its reckoning. The trial began in April 1992. Chikatilo was kept in a cage in the courtroom, a common Soviet practice, but also for his own protection. Families of victims filled the gallery, screaming for justice. Chikatilo's behavior was erratic. He ranted about his mistreatment, sang songs, and dropped his pants in court. He claimed he was being used as a scapegoat. But the evidence was overwhelming. Forensics, confessions, personal items from victims found in his possession. The trial lasted 6 months. 53 lives stolen. The youngest was 9 years old. The oldest was 44. Each had a name, a family, a future. They were students, workers, travelers. Some were vulnerable, runaways or people struggling with poverty. But they were human beings who deserved to live. In the chaos of the collapsing Soviet Union, these victims were nearly forgotten. Today, we remember them, not as statistics, but as people whose lives were cut tragically short. October 15, 1992. The judge read the verdict, guilty on 52 counts of murder. One earlier confession couldn't be corroborated. The sentence was death. Families wept. Chikatilo showed no emotion. He would spend his final months in prison, awaiting execution. The Butcher of Rostov would kill no more. On February 14, 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot behind the right ear, standard Soviet execution method. He was 57 years old. His body was cremated. There would be no grave for people to vandalize, no shrine for the deranged to visit. He simply ceased to exist. The Chikatilo case forced law enforcement across the former Soviet Union to modernize. It proved that serial murder could happen anywhere, under any political system. It highlighted the importance of centralized databases, criminal profiling, and interagency cooperation. The lessons learned from this tragedy helped prevent future atrocities and catch other killers. Evil exists. It can hide in plain sight, wearing ordinary faces. But justice, though sometimes slow, can prevail. The